Well, welcome everyone. We are glad you're here. This is a webinar sponsored by Writable on EdWeb. It's a fabulous community. Also, there are tons of online communities in EdWeb platform, and you'll get all the resources. There is a short quiz if you're looking for CE credits at the end. Download the chat or the slides. There's chat logs, lots of discussion. So make sure that you jump in that community. I'm going to throw this to you, Tess. Who is Writable?
Well, Writable is a comprehensive, research-backed, award-winning program that supports over 6,000 school districts, and it saves teachers time to grow great writers faster. The thing is that's wonderful and why I am so thankful to work for Writable is we have been supporting virtual educators alongside in-person educators the entire time that we've had Writable. So we are here. We are prepared to support you. We have over 600 pre-prepared assignments and prompts that you can assign right out for curricular content. This includes prompts and assignments for your EL students. We have launched a virtual learning guide, which you can see right up there on the screen, also accessible from writable.com. Writable is free for teachers and always free for teachers, but free for students and teachers through the rest of the school year. We also have launched Project Write Together, and this is a way for students to anonymously peer review with each other. So as a teacher, if you need to lighten your load a little bit, if you want your students to be engaged with other students during this time, you can sign up at writable.com for Project Write Together. We have another ed webinar next week just on virtual learning in general with Troy and Shaelynn. And Writable is here to integrate with your LMSs, Google Classroom and Docs, provide content, growth monitoring when you perhaps aren't necessarily able to be right there in the classroom, seeing how students are doing, and then guided feedback as well. Feedback is not always easy. It's a skill. This includes teacher feedback, AI-powered feedback, anonymous peer review, self-review, and quite soon there will be video and audio options to respond in Writable as well. So we are trying as hard as we can to provide whatever you need during this time.
So besides meeting the fabulous Tess, a little bit about me. Hey everyone, I'm Shaelynn Farnsworth. I'm from Iowa. Are there any Iowans in the crowd? So I'm a longtime educator, 20 plus years. Literacy is my jam. K-12 I span. I've worked at the district level, the state level. Right now I'm independent consultant, but I do lots of work for Writable. I help with their professional learning and their community. I just love it as a writing teacher because it is, like Tess said, one perfect way if you have a virtual environment to help facilitate that writing process. But enough about me. I am joined by experts in this field, and that's why I'm so glad that I'm a connected educator. I met these two fabulous beings in front of you right now a while ago, and I said, hey, what do you guys think about doing this webinar with me? They did not know what they were getting into, but I'm excited to have them here. We're going to start with Brett. Go ahead and wave, Brett. Brett comes from Texas. He currently serves as the district facilitator for sheltered instruction at the Garland Independent School District in Texas. So he comes with a wealth of knowledge. He has been in education for a long time, supporting English language learners and educators, supporting them as well. And something special about Brett, it is his birthday today, guys, and he decided to join us. So drop in a happy birthday to Brett in that chat. So he is filling the love. Brett, what's one thing super awesome about you everyone should know that I did not tell?
I have a farm, and so you may hear like geese and sheep and even an alpaca behind me. I'm out. Yeah, so that's always fun. So just keep that in mind.
In Iowa, it's a whole farm, right? So that's
Yeah.
just like a day. No, just kidding. And also, you may know her because she is all over the place and has even been on the Ellen DeGeneres show. Is Emily Francis. She is a longtime ESL teacher. She spans her knowledge, goes all the way down from elementary to currently she's at the high school level. She is an ESL teacher in Concord High School, Concord, North Carolina. And Emily, you have a very interesting story and something you want to share with everybody. Go ahead.
Hi, well, I'm so excited to join you guys. And something about myself, I wasn't born in this country. And so, second language to me is new. And that's why I have a passion for helping students who are learning a second language and at the same time trying to learn the content. So, that's it.
She is nationally recognized. She has a book. She just signed to write a book. And so I see a lot of people posting in the chat that they have heard you speak today or before. And that's great. So fantastic. I'm so honored to be connected with these two and also having them share. And like Tess said, they did do a pivot to include more remote virtual instruction advice just because that is the need right now. Again, at the very bottom, and Tess will drop it in the chat, we have created a document that includes all of the resources that will be shared throughout. So you can follow along. You can have all of these resources. Tess just dropped it in, but there's a short bit.ly at the very bottom of the screen. So if you are watching this recording after the fact, make sure you check out that bit.ly so you can access all of those goodies that everybody has developed and shared with you. Here's the agenda. We're going to talk about building and maintaining relationships, classroom environment and instruction, literacy strategies. They're going to give us some of their favorites, assessment, growth, and monitoring, and finally end with resources. Chat poll, we're going to have you answer in the chat instead of regular poll because guess what? Everybody's using webinars and the polls are down. So if you had to rate your level of preparedness when it comes to teaching ELLs, what would you choose? 1, not at all prepared, all the way down to 5, very prepared. So I'm going to start with Brett and Emily here. How would you rate your personal knowledge?
Well, I would hope pretty prepared.
I will say the same thing, but we're learning every day.
Yes.
So whatever I know, I just need to add more tools to my toolbox.
I love that. So smart. Of course, they're going to be towards the top, right? Tessa's like, silly question, Shaelynn. What did you
we're seeing a lot of 3s, but we're seeing 4s and 5s. I love that we are having so many experts and prepared folks in here, which to me speaks that you can also share with others your knowledge. So we have an amazing group of people watching that can answer questions for each other too. So want to make sure everybody knows if you have questions, put that in the chat. If I can't answer them, if Brett or Emily can't answer them while we talk, I bet there are other people here who can.
That's right. So the first section again is building and maintaining relationships. And I'm going to kick it to you, Emily. You love this quote. Why don't you go ahead and let us know about this quote?
Yes, well, I'm excited that, we're beginning with this webinar with relationship because to me, that's just core to everything we do. Just to building strong relationships is this quote right here. We cannot begin to form bridges between our ELLs until we know exactly who they are and taking time to really learn them. So when she shared this quote, she also shared these 5 basic questions that we should ask of our ELLs. So I'm going to go through these 5. And as an ELL and immigrant myself, I really wished when I walked into this classroom, my teachers would ask me these 5 questions. So the first one is, when your ELL walks into the classroom, can you identify who is an English language learner, who is not? Are we basing it just of looks, or do we have data knowing that this student is an ELL per se? And next is the country of origin. I may look like I am from Mexico just because of my dark skin, but I am from Guatemala. So it's so important not just to know that I'm an ELL, but what country is it that I'm from? just so you know the background. And then the third one will be the length and time of the USA. How long, when I walk into your classroom, whether it's an elementary, middle school, and high school, how long have I been here in the USA? The fourth one is languages spoken. So it could be that our immigrant students come from another country and they have learned English in their country, or maybe French, or maybe Persian, different languages. So it's important to understand what languages our students speak, not only to provide them with the resources, but just so we know what languages are spoken at home. And the last one, of course, is English proficiency. What is the level of English proficiency of our students? Some of them may come again from their countries with a high proficiency of English, and we need to know what level that is. So, those 5 questions are, for me, just core for us to build very strong relationships with our students. And if we invest in knowing these 5 things, our outcome is academic impact.
I'm gonna put you on the spot here. Would you still ask these same 5 questions, if you have somebody joining your district, and, their first experience is virtual? That could be a possibility for some of our kids. Would you ask these same 5 questions to a brand new student virtually as well?
Oh, absolutely. You mean you still want to know where they're from. That way, while you're at home, you can prepare some things so when that student comes to the classroom, if we get back to the classroom, then you will know. It's just, it creates a sense of belonging knowing these 5 questions. So, of course, I will want to know where my student came from.
Perfect. Yep, and I know, Brett, you agree with a lot of what Emily said, but you also, like to focus on this trust.
Absolutely. And so from my perspective, once we know those things, then the point is, okay, we're going to engage in instruction now, and I'm going to ask you to do a lot of pretty challenging things. So we really need to be able to establish this mutual trust, this mutual safety net. And so I put this quote from Nancy Motley from a webinar that she did in 2017. Success breeds motivation. And really, that's the core of how we establish that relationship where we can propel you forward and give you the tools that you need, is giving you the support to be able to see yourself doing hard things and accomplishing them. And then as a result, I know that this is a safe place for me, and that I can continue learning. I can trust this teacher. We can build this rapport, and then I can use that relationship to help grow you and guide you forward in your academics.
I love it. You also put in this strategy for
And
helping
so, yes,
maintain.
yes. So this comes from Carol Salva's Boosting Achievement, and one of the big things that she talks about is developing a social contract. And so now, I would say more than ever, this strategy is critical, because what this does is it clarifies for the EL, how are you going to participate? How am I going to participate as the educator? How are we going to work together? And so this is, as we go into distance learning, it's kind of uncharted territory for everyone. So if I'm going to expect my ELs to really engage and kind of do some of these challenging tasks with literacy, it would be really good for us to come together and clarify, what is that going to look like? What can you expect from me as support? And then what in turn do I need you to do as you participate in this digital environment I'm creating for you, or a distance environment that I'm creating for you? How are we going to work together with that? So I think this is a really relevant strategy as we move forward into new ways that we're going to provide instruction.
I love that. It's so important. And we also wanted to include some stuff. I'm going to kick it back to Emily for this one to start, even though she's going to talk. You have to talk about your social media, because if people do not follow you on social media, if you want to see how to connect and maintain those relationships, as you pointed out before, with kids, social media is your jam. You are an expert in this area. Emily, go ahead and share some of those things that you enjoy doing and what your kids love doing, and how it builds and maintains those connections in a remote virtual environment.
Right. So I work with high school students, and right now, well, that's where they rely on social media to connect with their friends. And so, why not throw it in there as a teacher too and connect with them through Instagram? That's the platform that they use most. And we already worked so hard to create those connections with our students. Social media helps maintain that. just make sure that we don't lose contact, make sure that we're still letting them know that we're here for them, just sending a photograph, let them know what you are doing, you want to know what they are doing. It's just a great platform to stay in touch.
And I mean, I know Brett is cringing in his seat with that TikTok. Oh, but I'll tell you, if you think about where I get my news, I see what's trending on Twitter, and then I go to Google. If you think about where my son, it's online gaming, gets his news, or Reddit. But my daughter, who is younger, she gets her news from TikTok. But teachers are using it, and like you said, seeing what you're doing, connecting to kids where they're at, letting them know that you're struggling as well, being human, that's great. Ed tech tools at the top, of course, we have Writable, Google Classroom, Screencastify. One of your favorites, Brett, that you feel your school does well in maintaining or using virtually to help strengthen relationships with your EL students?
Well, we use a lot of both Google Classroom and Seesaw. Seesaw has been, for me personally, I use that in my classroom. Our district uses it as well. But to me, that just kind of had everything all together to be able to honor all four domains of language and be able to also honor realia too. And so that's why I really appreciated being able to use Seesaw in my classroom, because we could do tech, but we could also do non-tech, and we can take a picture of, some of the manipulatives you use and come and refer to those later. And so I always like to be able to look for things from that lens of how can we encompass all the language domains and be able to provide support through that supports learners, comprehensively that way.
I love it. A lot of people are turning to Seesaw, Google Classroom, other LMS, those robust LMSs. And that's not only the beauty with working with our EL students, because that allows translation. I think of Google Translator or Microsoft Translator, supporting translation for not only students but parents for communication. And then since Writable fits so nicely in there, it's just a beautiful marriage with that writing process. Well, we need to keep going on. I know the chat is going crazy. I think it's over
Yeah.
7 people here joining us, talking about classroom environment and instruction. So when you think about management in the classroom environment, and we're going to talk a little bit about face-to-face and the traditional one, but also virtual one, plus instruction, what sort of instructional methods do you feel work best with students? Yeah, that's where we're headed. So here we go. Brett.
Emily has some really amazing examples and strategies she's going to show you. And I just kind of wanted to start it off with a framework of what kind of things should be in place to help make sure that our instruction is, yes, addressing the mind, the information that you need to learn, but also that affective side of my heart, my emotions, my identity. How is that being served as well? One of the first things is a print-rich environment. And so that's a strategic use of space. And so as we move to digital or distance, we still need to consider what kind of language support, word support, sentence support do we need to have in place in an LMS, in a Google Classroom, things like of that nature, to where our students can reference things that would have typically maybe been on a word wall, that now we can have access to in a different format.
Okay, let me ask you this, because I've seen it on videos, whether when people are shooting videos, whether to embed or live, and Emily, you can nod with your head here as well. I've seen them using almost like those word walls and different cues behind them, languages pasted on their buffets or on their walls.
Yeah.
Have you heard of any of those yet?
Well, that would be pretty cool. But anything that you can think of creatively that would be able to address what we normally would have seen in a face-to-face classroom, how would we continue to transition that support into a virtual one? And so being able to think for those outside of the box solutions of where would that go? What would that look like? How would my students access the print that they need to be able to tackle these grade level expectations?
That's right. So you took kind of like a specific view there of what it looks like in the classroom, but we're going to pull it back a little bit, to Emily, and culturizing your classroom and decluttering your walls. What do you mean?
Well, when I think about classroom environment, the very first thing about is identity affirmation for our students. And for the teacher herself too. I don't think about going out and buying every flag that you can find and put it all around your classroom. That's not culturizing your classroom. To me, culturizing your classroom is, what can I put on the walls that reflects my students' identity? See, as an adult myself, when I walk into a classroom or a room or a school, the very first thing I do for real is I look around for something that I can create a connection with my identity, whether it's Guatemalan, whether it's Mexican, whether it's anything that I can say, wow, that mirrors who I am. So in our classrooms, we need to be mindful of, when our students walk in, do they reflect? Can they see themselves in your walls? And of course, validate the students' languages. And I don't mean if you have 17 languages in your classrooms, make sure all the languages are posted. No, let your students work using their home language and decorate your classroom using students' home language. And this just creates an environment where students say, wow, this is our classroom. I belong here. And decluttering walls is, to me, your students, especially English language learners, cannot be overwhelmed by having walls covered with text. So if you are supporting your students with reading and writing a specific unit, that's the only support that you should have in your walls. So take everything down, because otherwise it's like lexican vomit for ELLs. They look around, they don't know where to look. So much. It's
So
too
you mean
overwhelming.
don't have 1,000 anchor charts all
No, no.
now
Put
moving from
away.
classroom environment down to instruction. Now this really talks about instructional methods and how you can do this both face-to-face and virtually. What works best with ELLs? Inquiry, Brett, you love digging into inquiry.
I do. And I think the biggest message here is that when we tackle developing English proficiency, we can't ignore the level of rigor and the high level of thinking. And any way that I can pose a question and give you the opportunity to think on your own, make connections, use resources, is not only giving you the opportunity to think at high levels, but it actually helps me to support your language better, because you're doing this on your own and I'm free to come and meet language needs as they arise. So for example, in this situation here, my students are writing a paragraph. The question is, how do you write a persuasive paragraph? So then they go and they find resources, they use resources I provided to answer that question, and then now they've constructed their own understanding of what it means to write persuasively. And that way I can now support if there's first language support needed, or if I need to do small group instruction. Those things are now available to me because I'm not lecturing it to you. It's in your hands for you to think and make connections on your own. So the level of thinking is high, but so is also your English development.
I love it. And you bring in a great point, because there's lots of different models you can define, you can explain, you can model, but inquiry is so important, especially for ELLs. And you give a hat tip there to Trevor McKenzie. So we started with that inquiry model. Now we're going to zoom back out here because Emily has something. She goes through these steps, which I think are brilliant. Tell us about this for framing your instruction.
Yeah, when you ask, about instruction, the very first thing that comes to mind to me are effective practices. If I'm providing instruction for my students, especially English language learners, I have to stop and think. It's not just about having a cultural relevance, it's having cultural sustained pedagogy, how I teach my students. So I have a little bit emoji here. So effective practices go this way. First, you think about, who am I teaching? Who is my audience? What am I teaching? That's my content. How will I teach it? That's my practices. And then how am I going to know if they really got what I'm teaching them? So here's my instructional model. And it's not mine, of course. It's a lot of chopped in from the SIOP model, but it goes from providing the background knowledge. You need to know what your students already understand about the topic. And it's research proven that when you tap into what they already know and you teach them something new, the brain creates a connection and they learn faster.
That's very
Clear input for me, yeah. We're using language. Even if you're not an ESL teacher, you are using language to provide instruction.
That's
So
right. Let
clear
me
as
ask you
hell.
this. before you go into the clear input, because I know this comes for a question for people, and I agree. This is good teaching. It doesn't matter what what who the student is. This is good teaching. There's been lots of research out there talking about how you can have students that might not share the same background knowledge, but together collectively they can build that background knowledge. What are your thoughts on that, Emily?
Well, we are not the only ones with the funds of knowledge.
Mhm.
As teachers, we need to let our students share among themselves what knowledge they have with one another. You let them discuss, and student A may have known something I don't know and may teach student B, and they can interchange background knowledge that I don't have. It's not me pouring all my beauty knowledge on my student. Is letting students learn among themselves and sharing each other's knowledge. So back to my
Question, and I know David put in there. I can see this, David, because it says if you mentioned research, tell me who the source is. They're scattered throughout, and my source where I pull a lot of this is from the best practices ELL. It's on that sheet. It's linked on that sheet. That test share test. If you want to drop that link again. So all of my resources personally and professionally are on there. If you need somebody specific, I'll get back to you on that one. Not right now during the chat. You're welcome, David. All right. So
Yes.
your input, and I know we got to zoom past these last.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, if you talk about effective practices, you're not going to do something because it looks pretty. You want to do it because there's research behind it. For example, clear input. Again, back to using language to teach. Students get information by listening and by reading. So, am I providing clear input? Am I teaching in a clear way that my students can understand it? And am I providing scaffolding text so when they read it, they can understand it? And boosting the output is getting language out of the student, opportunities for them to speak, opportunities for them to write. It's not just me spending 90 minutes sharing my content knowledge. And then, of course, constantly assessing, making sure that your students are understanding your content.
You also touch upon motivation, which I feel is so important. Especially when they get to those older grades, fifth grade on up, motivation comes into play more and more. Tell me a couple techniques and tips you use for motivation.
For motivation is simply being teaching the whole child, tapping into their experiences, looking at what is it that they already know, what did they learn in their countries. When you talk to students about what they already know versus just everything I know as a teacher, that motivation increases. And when we talk about the research on the filter, affective filter, when the students feel stressed and the motivation goes down. But when you tap into their potentials and you let them show their assets, they collaborate even more.
That's right. So what does this look like instructional wise in a virtual environment? Because we know it's a little bit different. So things to consider: content creation versus tools. What do you think about that, Brett?
Well, I just think we need to recognize that in what we're about to start working with, we're going to be creating content, and then we're also going to be utilizing tools. And so sometimes I think we can get hung up on one or the other, and recognize we need to do both. So when we create content, when we create lessons, we create presentations, stocks for our students. Are we considering what language supports need to be in place? Things that we may have thought were just for the face-to-face classroom. Well, how do we start transitioning that into the content I'm going to create for distance learning, and being cognizant of those things as well, that those supports need to continue even in this new format?
That's right. We've talked a lot about accessibility and how there's so many different options out there. You also touched upon, Emily, using social media to check in with your kids, let them get a glimpse into your life virtually, having those instructional methods. Maybe you are going to contact them via phone. So reaching out there however we can during this. But you also touched upon the parents, families, and caregivers.
Yes, I think it's very important to understand that, especially for immigrant families who have to work two, three jobs to put bread on the table, it is a very stressful time. Yes, I understand that we want to continue these minds being sharp and learning, but our parents are under stress as well. education looks different in all households, and we need to honor and respect that. And putting burden on our shoulders for our immigrant parents is just not the way to do it right now.
Yeah, I love that. Virtual PLCs and community sharing, there are tons of them out there. We are all parts of them. I do know specifically for writing and for literacy. Emily's part of our writer educator, Writable educator group. Tess, you could drop that link in there. She's active on Twitter, so is Brett. So they are very accessible for building their virtual PLCs. They run chats. So definitely reach out to them. And the peer-to-peer feedback, that's another thing that's very difficult. So not only do we want to be connected to our kids, but how do we connect them to each other and keep that going? So what are you using for virtual feedback in your own environment right now in your own online instruction, or what could you possibly use? Share in the chat. We've talked about tons of great different tools. Anybody using something specific for that feedback or connecting kids, the peer-to-peer feedback? How do you get them collaborating and talking together to maintain not only those social relationships, but also one of learning, growing?
Seen a lot of Google Classroom, Flipgrid, Class Dojo, Zoom, LMSs. I'm so glad you guys are finding tools to help you with feedback right now, because I think feedback is so important, especially during this time, because feedback is communication, right? Feedback is connection. Um, so I'm going to show you guys a little bit how feedback works in Writable. The way we have program feedback is based on research for creating writing growth, whether you are an EL student or a special needs student, or you're just trying to increase the ability and growth of students writing. So if you want to press play, Shaelynn, I'll just talk you guys through this little short video.
Perfect.
Okay, so Writable has a feedback engine. So we have AI feedback, Turnitin, self-review, peer review, and teacher grading. AI feedback is really great because it's not just telling students how they're doing, but it's actually giving them on-demand feedback. You're missing a thesis statement. You need more pieces of evidence. Really detailed feedback for when they can't necessarily get it in the classroom, especially right now, if they're wanting some on-demand support. This is a great way to do it. Originality checking, if this is a part of your class regularly, especially to check your sources and find out where your sources might be from. So that's embedded within Writable. You can see how it looks a little bit there. Self-review is really great. Self-review in Writable is guided. You'll see a checklist on the right-hand side of your screen. That is a rubric that's editable. And when students are hovering over the rubric items, it actually explains to them what they mean and then prompts them with sentence stems. So they're giving targeted feedback. This is how feedback looks when they're giving peer review as well. And what your teacher grading can also look like. You can also highlight and add comments the same way you would in Google Docs. This can actually be an embedded Google Doc, but then you can tie your comment to a rubric item so students can really address it in a targeted and guided way, which I know can be really helpful. Writable is for 3 through 12 or whenever students start writing, and everything is totally editable again. So you can change what the sentence stems are, what your rubrics are. If you have custom rubrics, you can switch this to Spanish language menus if you want to. You can add in videos, your own readings. You can add in multiple choice questions, video responses, and voice responses are coming. So you can really just, we think giving feedback in a guided way, especially right now, can be really helpful. And it's what we've heard from virtual schools that have been using Writable for a long time now, is that this really allows communication in an effective way. So I will close out this so you can see how we do a little bit of grading, if anybody is going to continue doing grading right now. Right.
There we go. Perfect. Thanks, Tess.
Well,
So we already have this that works with multiple platforms, but what sort of literacy strategies should we be using in conjunction with ed tech, because like everything out there, it's only good as the instructor. I asked Emily and Brett some of their favorite strategies for reading and writing in the classroom, and this is what they said. Brett, this is all you.
All right. So I'm a framework kind of a person. And so when I thinking about whatever format that we're using to read within, I want to know, like Shaelynn was saying, what is the instruction behind it? And so for me, with following the close reading model was huge when I was with my students, just because it made sure that we maintain for our ELs that level of rigor that's supposed to be there, and that you're still expected to get to grade level expectations. However, with an English learner, you may have to add some extra layers to it, because with close reading, what you're doing is you're reading the same text multiple times, adding layers of depth of your analysis. Well, with an English learner, you may have to also add layers of linguistic development to that as well. So keeping in mind that those pieces need to be present in order to get to that level of analysis.
And you also talk, Emily, about having low stress reading.
Yes. Well, working with high school students in elementary level too, because I've worked with elementary students when they don't know the language and you put in front of them a article, they get stressed out. There's so much text that they have to tackle. So the first strategy that I teach them is, of course, what do you know about this topic? That's going back to background knowledge. You're not going to learn everything here. You already know something about this topic. And once the students have shared a little bit about what they know about the topic, you begin tackling the text with like tier 1 words. Let's take a highlighter and highlight words that you already know. Maybe it's the word teacher, maybe it's the word maybe it's the word need. We highlight every text that we know, and students look at it and they go, wow, there's so many words that I already know. And this strategy is metacognitive strategy. They can apply this to any content when they're reading any article. So it's important for students to look at it and also verbalize it. If they verbalize the words, they're going to internalize it as well.
It's funny because if in the chat, some of the teachers have used that same article.
Oh!
Okay, but now moving on to writing strategies. What are some of your favorite?
So for me, my writing strategies always needed to answer these two things, which I think are the biggest things in our minds with supporting ELs. Is one, where are you going to get the words that you need to be able to write so that I don't have to spoon feed them all to you? And then two, grammar. How do I do that in a way that works, because everybody needs different things?
That's right. My goal, you said, is always independence, right?
Yes, exactly. And so for me, I mean, I'm going to be very limited on this because I could talk about mentor text literally all day.
Right. And I'm going to stop you right here and say, what is a mentor text? For those people that don't know.
Exactly, right? So mentor text is basically using text as a teacher for writing. So instead of me standing up in front of the room and telling you, well, this is the way that we will write an essay or a paragraph, let's go ahead and look at some quality, professional, real models of writing, and that's going to teach you how to do that. And so we're going to spend our energy getting into the mind of the author and how they actually craft their writing so that you can then produce it using the words that you discovered through that mentor text experience to then create your own writing as an English learner.
So this identify, independent study, independent edit. This also goes with the mentor text and developing grammar.
Well, this is the next piece of, okay, how do I deal with your grammar, knowing that everybody needs different things? And so this was a strategy that I used as a newcomer teacher that my partner, Tess Alviana, actually helped me with. And so what that is a 3-step process. And if you want to look at the next slide, it's got the images that go with it. So basically what we did was we developed a list of about 25 things that you could have an issue with, created a digital format to where you could go and find what that is. And so then I'm going to mark up your paper and recognize, okay, here you got an issue with number 1, number 14, number 13. Let's go ahead and go and to this blend space that I made here. And you, as a student, research what number 14 is. What is that grammar error that you're having problems with? Now come back to your writing and fix it. That way it's on you to go and do that discovery. And then you come back and you apply it to your own writing. And I don't feel like I've got to teach a million different grammar lessons all at once to meet the needs I'm seeing.
Everybody needs support in grammar. That's just a common. But you have graciously shared these links on the document, correct? So people can actually see these if they are want to dig into these. But we're moving now to Emily. When you talk about writing instruction and some of your favorites, you talk about breathing out.
Yes, yes, it's not my theory, of course. It's, reading is you taking in the text, you inhaling, and then writing is you exhaling. So it's so important not to just give students text to read, but also provide them plenty of opportunities for them to write. It's not about the quality, but quantity. How many times are they having opportunities to write? So here you see pictures of my students retelling a story, and they drew a picture. They're comparing and contrasting two individuals. So they drew a human person. I mean, they get so creative
I
when
love
you
it.
give them opportunities. On the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see students writing sticky notes, reflecting on picture books. So just opportunities. And in this book, if you haven't read it, Team Up, Fire Up, and Speak Up, when it comes to writing, they can illustrate, they can record, they can summarize, they can collect, they can brainstorm, they can offer opinions. So much. That's
So
breathing out. Let them breathe out.
And the title you referenced, we're going to talk about it later, but it is on the list as well. So here's a chat question. And again, this is supposed to be a poll, but we want to hear your answer. When working with ELLs, how should you group your students? Should you, 1, randomly mix them up, 2, group them according to their interests, 3, students select their own group, 4, group according to their language proficiency, or 5, never use small group during instruction?
Wow.
What do you think, Tess?
I'm seeing a lot of ones. I'm seeing
Yeah.
fours. I should mention that it's really easy to create groups in Writable for small group and large group. You can be a member of many kinds of groups. So that allows you to personalize your lessons, your assignments, and your instruction. Lots of 2s now I'm
Yeah,
seeing.
but actually, and we talked about this for a while. Emily, you think it is what number?
I believe it's 4.
4,
But
group
yeah.
language proficiency, and I'm highlighting this because it may be part of something later.
Yeah.
It is dependent upon the goal, but it may be part of something later. Group
Yeah.
to language proficiency, why?
Well, going back to grouping your students, I even found an article of 130 ways to group your students to work in groups. I mean, everything is acceptable depending on what is it that your objective is. If my objective is working with students in developing English as a second language or as a third language, then you need to group them as a number 4. You need to look at the language proficiency. You don't want to put a level 4 with a level 1 student and working in small groups. That just doesn't work. So if you switch over, this is how I group my students. When we sit down and group students, I place them in, and they may all be a level 1 because they all came from another country just a month ago, but some of them may have a little more on tier 1 than others. So we group them, and we start working and respect language acquisition process. Students first learn words, and then sentences, and then paragraphs. So you have to respect that process and work at that level. Going back to highlighting the text, students make a list. And once they make a list, let's go ahead and make a sentence based on that list you created. And I'm not worried about grammar right now. I'm just putting their thoughts on paper, and I get with them and I model the sentence, but I don't tell them how to write it yet until they give me a sentence. And you can see a picture of a bubble. I don't print out graphic organizers for my students, never ever, because I believe we need to empower students to create their own graphic organizers. So as you see there, students created it and then they wrote an essay and model it and have fun. Writing is fun.
I love it, and also, I think we could talk about grouping students, forever on here because yes, it's all dependent upon your learning goal. When we're talking about, this specific strategy, it is by language proficiency, and just remember that for later. But stories do matter. Authentic audience, why?
Well, because students get a little more motivation knowing that there's so many more people reading their text besides just the teacher. So if I tell them they're going to write an essay for me to grade them on Power School, they may not give me their best. But when you tell them that you're going to publish their story, maybe on Twitter, maybe on Instagram, I don't know, I'll get creative how to share the story. They get motivated to share. And of course, tapping into their stories. They love sharing their stories because it reaffirms who they are.
That's right, and I don't know if we're gonna get to it just because, time is slowly ticking away for us, and Brett keeps reminding me it's his birthday. Um, but you did link in one of your stories from your students that people can see on the document too, so that's fabulous. But assessment, it might not happen, but what does this mean? You can still measure growth, can't you? What is assessment used for in the classroom? And Brett's on mute.
Sorry, I'm trying to be respectful and then I forget to turn it off. All right. So the whole point of the assessment is to be able to understand where you're at and where you're going. And so I think, with whatever assessment that is, for us in Texas, it's TELPAS. I know other states have different things. A lot of us use WIDA. But I think the goal right now is to, with the time that we have and the resources that we have, how can we take advantage of what we know of the students, get some solid understanding of their growth, and then really maintain that growth mindset of, my support is supposed to lead you towards greater levels of English proficiency. And if I'm comfortable with the structures that are in place with TELPAS or WIDA, then let's go ahead and utilize those, the time that we have left, to be able to make some good decisions about how I'm going to support you in a virtual environment. But also recognizing that the whole point of this is to recognize you are here to grow, and I don't want to look at your language proficiency as your identity. I want to see that as a road marker on the path towards greater levels of proficiency. And how do I do that regardless of whether it's face-to-face or I'm doing that online?
That's right, and they love TELPAS down in Texas, don't they? And a lot of Texas users, and like you said, it's important to stay familiar with what kids know. Those types of collections are already available. There's a specific one for EL learners on Writable for TELPAS. So if you are already using TELPAS as part of your model, you can go in there, do it virtually, have a virtual platform through Writable, and push those out. Don't try to reinvent the wheel, or try to teach them something different, because I know down in Texas they love TELPAS, don't they, Tess?
They do, and so we really have made this collection of assignments. They are the same for WIDA, for LPAS and LPAC and TELPAS, which is really to support the skills that your students are needing to learn. And so we don't have to move away from those during this time. In fact, maybe it would be a sense of comfort to keep working on what they were working on. So it's really easy to just click and assign these without doing a lot of prep work. And then you'll be able to see on our teacher dashboard really what it looks like in terms of growth and in terms of where your students might be succeeding in the specific skills around your specific standards. So even when you don't have assessment, you can still measure growth, you can still personalize and intervene based on what needs are being shown.
Yeah, and the same thing is true with, and I know I'm mispronouncing this, so Emily, you'll have to help me. Is it WEDA?
WIDA.
Yeah, I always say WIDA. I always say WIDA. Okay, WIDA. So what would you say about WIDA? And I know it's not the goal right now to assess them, but if they're used to seeing this format.
Well, we need to start getting used to this. 35 states use the WIDA access to measure language proficiency. So it's important to understand how WIDA works, and it assesses every language domain. So if I know my students' language, remember we talked about the basics of understanding our students' language, then WIDA goes along with that as well.
And I am just getting those comments in there. WIDA, WIDA, Shaelynn, WIDA. I'll never forget it. All right, to be intentional as well for targeting and assessing language.
Yeah, well, I use the WIDA and the can-do descriptors to be able to target language. So I know content, it's so important, but you are using language to teach your content. So you have to use language objectives. What is my student going to be able to speak? What is my student going to be able to write? What is my student going to be able to understand? So I created this right here. If you can go to that bit.ly, language proficiency reports. So every time you do your content progress report, you could also do a language report. How is your student doing based on the can-do descriptors that are free and available on our WIDA website?
That's right, and you have those linked, and thank you for so graciously sharing that with everyone. Those are linked on the document. Love it. Um, and just like Tess said, those types of exercises, whether it be WIDA or TELPAS, I saw somebody said, can I use WIDA or TELPAS if I'm not from Texas or use it in the state? Yes. You can use anything on the platform and customize it. But using them for specific and being intentional with kids right now would be important. Multiple opportunities allow students their voice, their needs. Emily, what do you think about adjusting instruction with your assessment? You hear this a lot. Use formative assessment, use feedback, use what you understand and gain from kids to make changes in your instruction.
Right. And the question shouldn't be put, the burden shouldn't be put on students. Oh, they didn't understand me. What is wrong with them? No. Once I get that assessment back, put it on you. What am I doing? How is my instruction going? And based on that assessment, then I readjust my instruction. And one of the books I just finished reading, the Fire Up book, you'll see at the end, talks about assessment of the learning. So after I teach them, you assess, did they get my objective? And the other one is assessment for the learning. So once I assess them, how can I now adjust my teaching? And listen to your students, give them opportunities for them to say, hey, I don't get it. Hey,
Yeah.
I need more explanations. Let them use their voice. Because if you just guess that they get it, or do you have any questions? Wrong thing to say. Provide opportunities for them to really voice their need.
I love it. And just what Catherine said in there, it tells you what you're not doing. So there's lots of different supports in the Writable EL Learner Collection. We have LPAC in there, we have WIDA, we have TELPAS, customizable scaffolds. You can differentiate based on skills. So lots of great things to support students while they're virtually writing that you don't have to make off the cuff. And I think that's the beauty. We're being thrown into a virtual online experience. What can we use there that's familiar, that's already created, where we don't have to re-erect, right, the wheel?
You can also upload PDFs in Writable. So if you have readings, you can also copy and paste in readings, but maybe you have some familiar readings. Maybe you have readings from a curriculum you're already using. Those are totally uploadable, and you can annotate them as well in Writable. So that can bring some familiarity to your assignments too. So if you have a reading you love, absolutely.
All right, so favorite resources, and we're gonna zoom on through this. Like Tess said at the very beginning, she's gonna drop this link in there. We're collecting different resources, different blog posts, different things people share, not only from Writable, but obviously from Brett and from Emily, from other bloggers, other literacy specific, as well as other online remote opportunities as well. So that is virtual learning page of Writable. Just going to drop that link in there. So make sure that you check that out.
Or if you want to do a project write together too, if you want to get your students peer reviewing each other, you can
Yes,
set
that's right. As Emily said, an authentic audience. Why not connect kids virtually? It changes it. So Brett's book, you can choose only one on here. Which one's your favorite, Brett? They're all listed on the sheet, but which one's your favorite?
Oh, I know they were all career game changers for me, but I do have to give a shout out to Boosting Achievement, because that really was my guiding light as a newcomer teacher. It has it all in there: rapid literacy, writing for students with very limited educational backgrounds prior to coming to the U.S. as newcomers. So that one was a big one for me.
All right, Emily's go-to books. You can only choose one.
That's so not fair. Oh, all right. So 1.5. I like boosting achievement, of course. Unlocking English language learners and English potential. That one, that only it teaches you how to advocate for your ELLs. It talks about instruction. It gives you activities ready to go. So that's my go-to book.
I love it. We've already talked about Writable and everything that they can add. We love Write Reader. That's the link that you provided, Emily, as well. Write Reader, you're a big fan of them as well to create some of those multimodal books. But just share in the chat, what tools and resources are you planning to use when you teach virtually? And they might not be very different than what we had earlier, Tess.
Yeah, I imagine I'm hearing a lot of Google Classroom. Hopefully you could use Writable with Google Classroom. I know we are finding a lot of teachers are finding it helpful to just assign Writable content directly into Google Classroom. You can assign it to the stream. Grades and rosters are going to automatically sync. Students are going to write right there in Google Docs. So hopefully we can just provide you some support during this time. And we also are really committed to doing what we can to help you. So if you think of ways or content or anything that you need, reach out to hello@writable.com. I'll email you back personally. I would love to hear anything that we can do to best help you during this time.
Now, I know we don't have tons of time left, but there have been tons of questions.
Yeah.
Why don't you share a couple of questions, Tess, 1 or 2 questions that you feel people would love to hear answers from Emily and Brett?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. How can we support and motivate older newcomers who come to us with little or no previous education? I thought that was a great one.
Read it one more time. How can you support older
Older newcomers, so perhaps, older English language learners who come without, a lot of previous education.
So how can you support the older kids that come as newcomers if they haven't had a lot of um, typical Americanized education before? So how do you support those older kids?
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate you mentioning that because it's not just the American education, it's
Mhm.
what background do they have? They're not blank slates when they come to us. They
No.
have some knowledge, and just based on what they already know, start building based on that platform. So I have students who spent years in camps and refugee camps, and they have never been in school, and they're in high school right now. But hey, let's start from where they are. If we have to provide foundations of phonics, let's do it. If we have to teach them how to make a sentence, let's do it. Just take it one step at a time and respecting that process.
Yeah, and that's where that grammar strategy that you had, Brett, comes into to play
Mhm.
because in some of those early reading ones, setting those foundational skills even before you start comprehending. Brett, what's one thing you would suggest if you have older newcomers with
Well, the biggest thing with that situation is recognizing you as the teacher cannot fill in the instructional need that that student brings to the table. I can't teach you all the algebra, the math that you didn't have. I can't teach you all the English, but you can. So I want to put my efforts into training you to be as independent as possible and to
Mm.
help you be confident in what resources do I use when I don't know, when I don't understand what's going on? What am I going to do when the teacher's talking and I have no idea what they're saying? I'm going to put my efforts into training you into those kind of situations so that regardless if the support is there or not, you've got strategies that you can use to help guide your own learning. And that's really what's going to propel that student forward. I, as a teacher, don't have the ability to fill in that gap of information in this given space of time that I've got with you.
I love that. Tess, another question that you have, and I see you have your Bark assistant.
Absolutely. So, I do. So, I thought this was a great one. I sometimes struggle to find culturally responsive texts that are at a good level for my ESL students. What are some of your favorite texts or resources for I want to quickly answer that I have been hearing too. Aside from having a lot of text and Writable, Newsella is free right now, and Newsella has really great texts, and New York Times Learning also has really amazing texts.
I
But
did. Share them
where
last week, Brett did. So where do you find them? I know there's a hashtag and there's a group, Disrupt Text, um,
mm,
that shares a lot of different text. One I learned from Emily before she adds is Unite for Literacy. I love that. That's more for our youngest learners, right? K3, K4. Um, other places to find diverse text, Emily and Brett.
Yeah, picture books, and yes, there's not a whole lot out there, but if you look at diversebooks.com, there's a whole list of books that you can use for your students that reflects your students' identity.
That's right. Brett, anywhere else that you would say?
The best thing that I've ever gotten is from the PLN and being able to go and ask, because sometimes those books are gems and really hard to just search and find. And so the best things that I've come up with is as I ask, and the resources that come from being connected are far better than what I would have come across had I done a Google search or tried on my own. People know things, and I'd like to tap into that as much as possible.
That's right. And somebody said, ask your librarian. Yes, who could forget the librarian? They are waiting to do, right? And Hannah said, can you put these on the list? Hannah, you don't know yet, but I'm a list collector and I'm going to take all these and I'm going to put it on that resource document for you. So you will have that. One more question, Tess. Do we have time for one more or not?
Yeah, I think we definitely do. One of this was, why are ELL students misidentified as needing special needs so often? What were your guys' thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah.
I
Very
know, can of
hot
worms.
topic. Very hot topic. I think number one, I really believe that it's advocacy from teachers toward the student, because whether the student needs to be placed or not to be placed, I think there needs to be a huge advocacy, making sure that the student really needs that placement or doesn't need that placement. And when I put my head on my pillow, I need to make sure that I have a clean conscience that is not language. So if I have worked and I have provided interventions, and if I have done everything in my power to make sure and rule out language, then I place them in different areas of support. But it has to be my conscience, making sure that I've done what I have to do first.
Yeah, and I have some resources. I'm not going to go into them just because I've heard some of the speakers that specialize in that I'll put on that list for people as well. But Brett, what would you say?
I would say for us, the biggest thing I would say to advocate is to help stop this message of what I hear all the time is, oh, the resources and the support that students in special ed need is pretty much the same that what an EL needs. And so what that does is it creates this connection in our minds that being an EL is the same as having a learning disability, and it isn't. And so we need to talk about supporting an EL as being truly a different thing, because learning a language is not the same thing as having a learning disability. And we should have a very different approach to that.
Say it again for the people in the back, Brett.
Supporting language and supporting a learning disability, not the same. It should look different. It should look different.
Thank you.
Yes.
It has to look different to work.
It has to look different to
exactly work. Yes.
Your librarians want to help. I got to throw that in. Right. So I'm sure we could ask questions all day. Yes, this could be a whole another webinar. Thank you guys so much.
I add one quick thing. We are all hopping on Twitter chat, which Writable hosts every Wednesday at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern, #Writing Matters. You can follow along in the hashtag, follow along Writable's Twitter. We get so many folks who come in, and we are talking about remote learning and teaching tonight. It is oftentimes a quick 30-minute information share. So if you're looking for more connection, more community, more ideas, I would love for you to all join us in addition to our Writable Educators group, in addition to finding more resources through our virtual learning guide, and signing up for Project Write Together. I hope everyone does that. It's for EL students as well as traditional English learners or traditional English speakers. So we can all do this together.
We can do it together. And I know Emily is a huge fan of Katie Kelly, who's leading the chat here in an hour. Yes, fabulous. Anyway, so we're excited about that. We're excited. It's Brett's birthday, and he is now. Whoop, whoop, his daughter made a cake. Yeah. And again, thank you so much to Emily and Brett. We appreciate you sharing jam-pack hour with all of your resources and your guidance and your expertise and your own experiences. We know that there's tons of educators in the chat sharing resources as well. Tess was sharing resources. Heidi jumped on. I saw Heidi Perry in there, the co-founder of Writable. Everybody just wants to do our best for kids right now, and we can do this together. We can support all kids and all educators, right?
And we'll be here next week at 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern. Shaelynn and Dr. Troy Hicks, who is a experienced online educator and literacy expert, and they're going to be talking about general literacy education. We can continue the conversation about EL learners, and we're going to talk about non-EL learners as well. So if you know any teachers who want some ideas and support and resources, I hope we see you then too.
Thank you, guys.